This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is the show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, type in Old Dogs, spelled D-A-W-G-S, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, we have a great show for you today. We have a cash flow expert. So I'm looking forward to hearing this because, as you know, our motto is cash flow is king here. So I'm talking about Chris Miles. He is a cash flow expert and an anti-financial advisor. Okay, we got to find out what that's all about. Who teaches entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them today. He's an author, podcast host of the Chris Miles Money Show, has been featured in U.S. News, in World Report, I assume, CNN Money, EO Fire, and has a proven reputation with his company, Money Ripples, getting his clients fast, life-altering financial results. In fact, his personal clients have increased their cash flow by over $200 million in the last 10 years. Well, Chris, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here, Bill.
Well, it's great having you on. Boy, I want to hear all about this, especially this anti-financial advisor thing. But before we do, our listeners here like to hear about the person, you know, where you're from, where do you live, you know, that kind of thing, and how you got into this financial area.
Yeah, so I originally grew up near Portland, Oregon, before it went totally crazy, like it is today.
Yeah.
Grew up out there in the Pacific Northwest, moved out actually to the mountains. I'm living here in Utah now for the last 22 years. It's been now. I've been here in Utah. I finished up my college out here. The main reason I picked out here is because the two best ballroom dancing schools existed here, right? The world's championship teams both were here in Utah, and I was getting into ballroom dancing. And funny enough, I was actually a sociology major with a triple minor in psychology, Japanese, and ballroom dancing. So,
wow, that's an interesting combo.
Kind of a Renaissance man of sorts, right? That's kind of describes me in general. But my whole purpose was to go into business consulting. That was what my aim was to do. And as I went to do that, I thought, well, if I'm going to become a business consultant, instead of just getting a degree, shouldn't I have real life business experience, right? And so just right during the whole Y2K era, that's when I dropped out of college to go out and seek the entrepreneur path. And when I did that, what I found out is that I actually liked being an entrepreneur. I liked having control of my own time, my freedom, and that sort of thing. And the funny thing is, the first opportunity that came up to become basically be an entrepreneur was to become a financial advisor. Now, I didn't know at the time. I thought financial advisor, you had to have like major finance degrees. You had to be, brilliant some way or rich. And I didn't realize that all you had to do is pass a test and have a heartbeat, and they will take you on as someone who's supposed to be more knowledgeable about money than other people, right? Mm-hmm. And but in any case, I liked being the entrepreneur, and I got into that field. And did that for 4 years, and in the meantime, I was married, started having a bunch of kids. In fact, I'm actually now remarried, and I've got a blended family of 8 children. So
wow, one
between
more
my
than
wife
me.
and I've got the 6, she's got the 2. So obviously, she has to love me a lot more. So, so obviously we've got a nice big family and everything here that we have. But after, 4 years of being a financial advisor, I realized there were some things wrong with it, because I'm the kind of guy that likes evidence. I like things to be real. And I realized that when I inherited clients that had been getting decades of advice, even from like the 70s and 80s and 90s from financial advisors, they weren't financially free yet. And, but at the same time, I thought, well, it's got to work. The theories seem, pretty solid. Everybody teaches the same stuff of save everything, spend nothing, save it forever, save it for the long haul, especially when the market goes down. You got to stay in it longer, right? Just try to do everything to be cheap and to sacrifice, suffer, and suck your entire life away until hopefully someday you might have something in savings, right? And as I started really looking into it more, and I started looking at what's the real rate of return of the stock market, not 12% like we claimed it would be, even though that might be the quote unquote average rate of return, that's not the actual yield of the market, right? Where the actual yield is closer to about 8%. And that's assuming you don't have any fees coming out. If you got fees coming out of your funds, say 1%, you're likely to make 7%, if you're really lucky. And when I started putting in real numbers, and I started putting in real inflation numbers, it's funny how people say, well, yeah, the feds are targeting 2%. It's like, 2% of the Rule 72 means that since 1985, your lifestyle should have only doubled. And Bill, I know you've been around long enough, just like I have, and I'm only about 44, right? But I've been around long enough to know that with inflation, it's definitely more than doubled since 1985. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so, so when I started realizing, wait, the feds, they're not telling us the real rates of inflation. What if it's double? And you know what? The numbers were absolutely depressing. I realized that you can never save up enough in a 401k to ever become financially free, or into any mutual fund for that matter. I mean, you'd have to save just a sick truckload worth of money and then live cheap in retirement to actually make this system work. And it didn't dawn on me until finally, it was at the end of 2005. I called up a friend to wish him a Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. And as I called him up, he had actually left the financial business. He had went to go do real estate investing with his dad. They partnered together to do some deals. They had only been doing it for 4 months. And I asked him how he's doing. He said, man, it's great. My dad and I, we've actually doubled his income as being a professor at the local university. And I said, what? In 4 months, he's doubled his income? That's too good to be true. Come on, that's not possible, right? Because I'm sure you've been in the real estate game, you hear the same thing. It's like, well, that sounds too good to be true. But for us, that are real estate investors, no, it's not. It's actually reality, not theory, like in the financial world, the traditional financial world, right? So anyways, I said, well, that's too good to be true. And we've gotten this debate about what's better, stocks or real estate. And finally he stopped me. He said, Chris, let me ask you a question. How many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money every day? And I thought about it and I said, well, none, because they watch CNN. If you watch CNN, you're always scared. So that can't work. He said, all right, well, great. Good job, Chris. Way to get nobody free. All right, well, how about this, Chris? If anybody's got this figured out, it should be you as financial advisors. So how many of you, including yourself and anybody else in this industry, how many of you guys are financially free, not off the commissions you've been earning off these people, but actually off of doing the same investments you've been recommending, off of mutual funds? And I thought about it and I said, well, none. Maybe this one guy is. And I found out later he wasn't either when he got let go. And he said, well, there's your problem. And I said, well, tell me the answer. He's like, I won't tell you the answer. And I said, well, you better tell me the answer or I'm going to break your kneecaps. So come on, tell me something. Give me something here. You got me to admit that there could be some flaws here. He said, well, listen, I don't think you're open to it, but if you are, go get this book by Robert Kiyosaki called Who Took My Money? A lesser known Rich Dad book. He's like, get that book, which basically rips into mutual funds and why they stink. And he's like, and then listen to this radio show, this AM talk radio. This is pre-podcast days, right? He's like, listen to this AM radio show put on by these two real estate investors. And I did. And you know what? I just got sucked in. I saw what was really happening. And as I started to listen to their show, and just like everybody here is listening to this podcast, right? Like I started listening to these shows and realizing, wait a minute, I can't keep teaching this stuff anymore and stay in integrity. I know that there's a fallacy here. And so by March of 2006, I quit. Vowed never to teach about money again. I said, I will just go do mortgages. I'll be a mortgage broker and I'll teach ballroom dancing on the side. And that's kind of what I did for about a month or so until I realized I got to know what these guys know. I got to figure out how they became free and, multimillionaires themselves. Some of them were younger than I was at the time. Some of them were in their 20s. And I had to know. And so I started to learn from these guys. And, long story short, later that summer, I was able to become financially independent myself at 28 years old. And after that, after I was able to retire, I thought, well, what am I going to do with my life? And that's kind of where I went down the path of teaching people how to become financially free and improve and increase their cash flow so that, you have more options and more freedom to work because you want to, not because you have to.
Interesting. Wow. And you talk about, too, that when you became financially free twice. Is that right?
Yeah, that's not a good thing, though.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
Maybe you could explain that.
Yeah, you bet. So like I mentioned, 2007, I came out of retirement to, teach people how to become financially independent, right? Well, lo and behold, like as I'm partnering with these guys, I had these multiple streams of income coming in, which was the best and absolute thing I should have been doing because, again, I like to stay in integrity. Well, these guys said, you know what? You need to be focused. Our mission is to teach people how to become free, cut off these other distractions, these other streams of income, cut them off and just focus here. So mistake number one, I cut off my streams of income, right? Especially the passive or residual ones I had. And then two, of course, as we got into the recession, everybody we were teaching at that time were real estate investors. And these weren't the good type of real estate investors. These were the ones that were banking on appreciation. So as you can imagine, 2007, especially when the summer, lending started tightening up that summer of 2007, moving into the fall and into 2008, pretty soon all these people were broke that we're trying to teach. So they don't have money. They're not paying us. I cut off all my streams of income. I'm also not tracking my money because it was coming in so abundantly. I didn't care to even watch how much money was coming in or going out. Well, the next thing I know, I started noticing that savings account balances were decreasing rapidly while my credit card balances were increasing, right? And I finally decided to start to look at what was going on, realized I was in the hole $16,000 a month between my business and my personal life. So with the money coming in, I was short about $16,000 a month. So I was quickly sinking. Got to the point where I had to make some drastic changes. I didn't file for bankruptcy, but oh my goodness. I mean, I went over $1 million in debt, especially as real estate turned, because a lot of my real estate, I was also banking on appreciation. I wasn't, the ones that were cash flowing weren't cash flowing well. And so, when you start losing value and everything else, things hit the fan and essentially it was like me hitting a reset, but instead of going to zero, I was going to negative 1 million or about 1.1 million to be exact. So from about 2008, 2009 on, I'm clawing my way back out and working to pay off all these debts. And then eventually got to the point where, once again, by the end of 2016, I was financially independent again, this time much wiser by the time I was just about to hit 40, much smarter the second time around. And I just made sure that, I had multiple streams of income coming from various sources. Pretty soon, all the boring stuff looked sexy to me. I wasn't trying to hit these huge home runs by gambling and making big money on real estate deals. I was going for the boring $300-$400 a month type deals, right? The things that I knew would create consistent, predictable, stable cash flow. And that's kind of how I do it today. And that's what I encourage people to do as well is, hey, you can make money. People are trying to gamble in Bitcoin and things like that lately, or some people are still trying to stay in the stock market because it's been up for 12 years. But those of us that have been around long enough know there are cycles and bubbles pop. And there's a lot of bubbles out there with a lot of greed, a lot of speculation, especially. Yeah. And that's the stuff that I try to stay away from. I try to go for the things that are certain, that give me good, consistently high rates of return that people really can't get in the stock market when they gamble their money away in those places.
So what are your primary investments then? You talk about multiple streams of income. Where are you getting those that cash flow from?
Yeah, so I'm still semi-retired, but I've got some residual streams of income coming through business. Different things from like online. Even well, like you've got a podcast. I've got things like sponsors. I've got traffic flow and things that get paid through there. But then I also have my own passive investments too. So I have things like my favorite investment is turnkey real estate. I love not managing a property. Kudos to those that can manage their own properties, but I'm one of those people. I'd rather buy away from the western half of the United States where prices are high but rents are lower. I look out more towards the southeast and the Midwest, buy properties out there, and have somebody else manage it for me. So I do a lot of that. I of course invest in different people's syndications. I've got money in different funds. Like different real estate type of funds that pay consistent returns. I'm even investing in land in this next month where we're partnering up on some land deals and doing seller financing and things like that. So for me, it's mostly passive investing. I really don't like doing active investing. Not that you can't, but I learned pretty quickly that if you're looking to become financially independent, one of the most important things to do is if you're going to find an active way to create income, like if you're going to create a business, like many of my friends will do wholesaling or they'll do flipping. If you're going to do a business, make sure you do a business that you love, even if you don't make the money in it. Like if it's something that you have to make money to love it, that's not the right business for you. Because why would you try to become financially independent only to work yourself into another job, right? A job that you're just working for a paycheck. It should be something that you enjoy. For me, I don't really enjoy those kind of active investments personally, and so I go more for the passive investments.
Gotcha. And with your investing, for the most part, are you always sort of looking at markets and different opportunities in the turnkey area, which it sounds like a big chunk of your investments are?
Yeah, absolutely. Like always searching, but not searching desperately, right? Mm-hmm. If you start getting emotional about it, that's the time that things are going to go wrong for you. When you get greedy or you get fearful or you put yourself in a place where you're taking on too much risk. But like with turnkey providers, I have at least a half dozen or so that, I'm on their lists and I'm watching and seeing when opportunities pop up and if it's the right one. And if it's not, like right here, the last few months, interest rates on just investment properties skyrocketed. They went from 4% that I closed on with a couple of properties in Alabama, and I even paid those down to 3.5%. And now all of a sudden I saw it jump up within a month to 4.875 because Fannie Mae started putting on restrictions, especially for second investment properties and things like that. So so now I'm kind of putting the brakes on it and looking at other avenues. Looking at things like multifamily syndications, or looking at different types of funds or lending and things of that nature that you can always rotate through, and depending on the markets and the time. Obviously, look at self-storage, and things like that. There's plenty of opportunities out there even now. It's just a matter of really looking for the right ones at the right time.
Now, are you still a financial advisor?
Not in the traditional sense. No, I dropped those securities licenses back in 2005.
Okay.
Ironically, just before I had that conversation with that guy. So that's why I was a little bit more open to realizing, yeah, I could see that mutual funds stink, right? and at the point where I wasn't really offering mutual funds at that point. But what I do right now is I work more like a consultant, right? So when I look at a person's situation, I'm seeing more of, okay, let me see what's here. Let's see what's in this. And I'll tell you that my favorite clients are the ones that are like the Dave Ramsey poster children. Mm-hmm. The ones that said, hey, I'm going to pay off all my debt. And then they get there and say, where's my freedom? Why don't I feel any more free? Because I still have to keep working a job. Just because I paid off my debt doesn't mean I'm expense free,
Right.
That's the funny thing is that, many people think, hey, once I pay off my debt, I'm free. No, you're not. That debt was maybe 20, 25% of your income at most, most likely you still have all these other expenses that are still existing because you're a human being and you're on this planet and you're not living off the grid yet, Right. So as a result, that's why many people say, all right, I've done this stuff, but what can I do to actually get my money working for me so I don't have to keep working so hard for my money? And so that's one of the things I do with the consulting side of things. I actually still have an insurance license. One strategy I learned from those real estate guys 15 years ago, was the concept of infinite banking. If you've ever heard that
Yes,
mentioned before.
I sure have.
Now I'll tell you, the infinite banking they taught me initially is horrible. Like I could see why real estate investors didn't like it, and why even I had a problem with it. Because when my cash flow hit the fan in 2007, 2008, and I had these hefty premiums I was paying, but all of those premiums were going to fees and commissions. I had no cash in there to support it when I couldn't pay the premiums anymore. So I learned through my own. In fact, I actually asked the guy. I had asked him up front. I said, "Hey, is there a way I can overfund these so that these whole life insurance policies where more cash builds up in them faster?" And his answer to me was, "No, you would trigger tax. The taxes. You'll create what they call a MEC, right? So it becomes, just like an IRA." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I don't want to do that. Okay, I'll do it the way you told me to do it." Well, I found out later on, after I lost those policies that he had set up on me, I found out that I actually could have designed it the way I was hoping to. Because remember, I wasn't a newbie. I was actually insurance licensed 4 years prior to meeting him. I just thought whole life was a ripoff. So right. I was anti whole life up until that point, and so I found out I could actually design them better, and to the point where now instead of having 100% for the first 2 years of your money going just to commissions and fees and everything else and insurance costs, instead I can have only about 20 to 25% go in the first year. Second year, maybe only about 12% goes to fees. And then by the third year or so, nothing. Like I actually have a net gain instead of a net loss. So the difference is, like, when I get clients that say, "Hey, this is what this guy showed me at putting in $50,000 a year," and they have zero cash after putting in 100 grand. The difference is now you've got at least $85,000 in cash right there. And so I refer that more as the strategy of max ROI, infinite banking. And that's actually the thing that got me out of retirement the second time, is because there was a real estate investor who had his own podcast show that said, "Chris, my docs and people that follow me got to hear this stuff and learn this. What do I have to do to convince you to teach them rather than you just farming it out to your friend?" And he eventually got me out of retirement to start doing it, found out I could actually do it better than my friend was. And that's why now I've done this and even started training a team to use this very strategy where you get the minimal fees possible to get the maximum returns and essentially double dip on your investment returns.
Yeah, I know a fair number of investors that are, actively doing the infinite banking approach, and they do say it's very narrow. There's only a very few companies that really offer the right kind of deals that make it make sense. But because a lot of people that offer whole life, but not all of them in a way that'll work with the infinite banking approach, from what I understand. Yeah.
And even if you find the right company, I've found that in many cases, even then, the agents don't set them up right, to the point where you maximize the potential ROI in them. I actually had that experience with a guy I just talked to today. In fact, him and his wife, they had set up policies with a guy who was publicly known as an infinite banker. But as we analyzed the numbers and everything, found out, I said, "Well, you know what?" And they're in their 50s right now. And I said, "Well, based on how he's having you put money into it, if we do apples to apples here, even if there's that upfront cost of switching to a different type of policy, here's the thing, is that you're going to have in 20 years, $2 million more of cash putting in the same amount of dollars you're putting in with this current plan right now." And again, this guy was doing and teaching infinite banking and doing a good job with it. He just wasn't doing the best job. And for them, that's a $2 million difference in 20 years. Ironically, they would even have more death benefit too. So,
wow.
Even though I try to get the minimum death benefit possible, because of, again, the way, if you design it efficiently where it cuts back the agent's commissions to the minimum possible, it's amazing just how much these things can perform and do better and essentially become a no-brainer, to where I call it like a tax-free supercharged savings account.
And when you say to the minimum, what would the minimum death benefit be in your focus?
Yeah, minimum death benefits, whatever it is based on the situation. So I always reverse engineer them. I always figure out, okay, what's the maximum amount of money we want to contribute per year? And from there, figure out what's the minimum death benefit needed to allow that to go in. And that's different based on your age and your health rating, so, but it's always whatever the minimum death benefit has to be so that we can get right up to that tax-free limit, right? Like we can dump in as much cash as possible with the least cost coming out as possible over those years.
So you can't give me a range roughly or some, I mean, let's say for someone in your age bracket.
Yeah, I mean, so it depends. So like, for example, in my age bracket, if somebody wants to put in a max of 50,000 a year, let's just say as an example, right? For 50,000 a year, that would buy me about $1.25 million of death benefit.
That's pretty
somewhere in
good.
that ballpark.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody was 55, say 10 years older, it might barely buy them. It might even be less than $1 million. It'll buy them, right, of death benefit. So I always tell people, like, I don't really care about the death benefit that much. It's just a matter of figuring out what's the minimum death benefit needed to allow us to get all this money in there to go in there, grow tax-free, and then come out tax-free. And most importantly, not to just use this as a retirement vehicle like a lot of people proclaim it to be, even those infinite bankers that say, hey, you get this tax-free retirement income down the road someday, right? I actually have people using this money now, sometimes even the first year, that they're going and investing in their deals. Whether it's, they're active in real estate investments, whether they're passively investing, wherever it is, we're using this money as the way to fund those things. And then the returns come back in to pay back the line of credit that you use to leverage that. And by the way, oh my goodness, there's banks out there lending on these policies at like 3.25% right now.
Yeah.
While the policies are paying like 5.5%, 6% currently. So you're getting this double arbitrage, right? Because you're obviously making money from the investment, but you're also making money from the interest of those policies. Because if you just use a savings account, you liquidate the savings account, you've lost the ability to earn interest. It's only making money in one place, which is the investment. But if you have the money that's in your policy growing tax-free at 5 or 6%, and you get to invest it too, right? You get to basically eat your cake and eat it as well, right? Now you're making money at two places at the same time. And, I tell people that even on average, you're making about a 3 to 4% per year return on top of whatever returns you're making on your real estate deals.
That's great. That's great. Well, you've been an investor for a while, and it sounds like you've kind of done the gambit, I'm sure, in terms of stocks and mutual funds and as well as real estate. What would you say was the biggest mistake that you made as an investor that you learned most from, and maybe it's something that our listeners might learn from as well?
Oh boy, just one.
You can give me a couple if you have to.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I mentioned trying to swing for the fences, right? Trying to go for those home runs. That was a big mistake because the thinking I had before the last recession was, all right, if I buy a $100,000 property, it appreciates 10%, I make 10 grand. But if I buy a $500,000 property and it grows by 10%, I make 50 grand. So let's go big or go home, right? And there was a lot of people I know that got sucked up into that as well. There's so many people building spec homes. There was appraisal fraud going on left and right. I mean, it was just ridiculous, right? There was so much greed going on. And I learned pretty quickly that, one is definitely don't buy into the greed. And especially listen to your gut. Like my intuition told me there was a red flag going off in my stomach, right? Like I knew something was wrong. But I was like, you know what? But hey, everything I've done up to this point's worked, so why not? And I got overly confident, right? I got prideful, and as a result, you get sloppy and you make mistakes. And so, I think the biggest thing I've learned is to always look for those what if scenarios. Worst case, how do I manage my risk to get it to as close to zero as possible, right? So, that's one reason why I do real estate investing versus the stock market, because the stock market. Hey, I've taught people how to trade stocks and options. I did it myself. But you can't really mitigate your risk to zero. Like you're really just gambling. You're guessing. You're completely just guessing, hoping that what you choose works out. And if you do lose, you minimize your losses so that your gains will still be more than your losses, right?
Right.
Real estate doesn't have to be that way at all. Real estate can be very calculated. It can be very predictable. Yeah, things can come up that are unexpected. That happens. But again, like people worry about, what if my property gets damaged? Well, do you have homeowners insurance? Do you have the right policies in place to make sure they actually cover your properties? If it's flood insurance or whatever it might be, hey, spend the extra money to do that to secure your investment. People might say, well, what if there's a vacancy? Well, great. Well, make sure you get good tenants. And there probably will be vacancies, but let's make sure that you have a property management. If it's not you as a property manager, make sure you have a property manager that's in communication with them saying, hey, in 4 months, your lease is coming up for renewal. Do we need are we going to renew this lease? Or are we going to, need to prepare to get you out, that kind of thing. So, all that kind of stuff that you can do to mitigate your risk is so, so important, So, and if you're a passive investor, one thing I've learned is, don't just go for the shiniest objects or the shiniest people out there. There's plenty of people that I've noticed are great at marketing themselves, but are full of crap, to put it simply. I love to see evidence. I like to invest with people that actually went through the last recession. Like, I love to know when someone says, yeah, I've been investing in real estate for 15, 20 or plus years. Great. How'd you do during those years? Even if they failed, did they learn something and adjust like I did? Because if that's the case, great. But if there's somebody who just came on the scene maybe 5 years ago, a lot of the rising generation have been, and they're saying, yeah, real estate's awesome. It's great. I've made money every time. Well, congratulations. Just about everybody made money in the last 5 years in every market. So that doesn't tell me anything. Like, how do I know for a fact that, one, that you know what you're doing, even if things go wrong, that you have contingency plans in place? And then two is, what happens when the pressure's on? Because I saw a lot of people in the last recession that maybe they had money, but they were so scared or just something was going wrong that they didn't want to pay their investors back. They didn't want to completely go bankrupt themselves, or they just went bankrupt easily. Like, when the pressure's on, where's your integrity? I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why, I didn't file for bankruptcy myself. It's not like I had investors' money necessarily, but I was wanting to make sure I paid back the money I owed. Even if it was at a discount. If I was settling with a debt collector or something like that, I was making sure that at least I was paying them something to where they felt they got what they wanted. And I think that's key, is that when you're looking for investors, if you're going to passively invest, make sure you're finding somebody who, one, has experience that's been through the ups and downs. Two, they like boring investments, like the ones they do like the back of their hand, the one they do over and over. Those are the best investments to invest in. The boring are the sexiest ones, right? And then three is, what were they like when integrity is on the line? Will they fulfill on that? That's critical.
Right. And conversely, what would you say was your biggest success? What key action or event really was your biggest success as an investor?
I think the biggest success is being resourceful. Not giving up, of course. That's always, number one, right? But going along with that is being resourceful while not giving up. Finding creative ways to create money, to make money, to save money, to pay off debts and everything else. And in fact, that's where my whole, consulting, it came from, right? Even during the recession, I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race during the recession because, again, I didn't want to be teaching something out of integrity. So I started teaching people how to be resourceful, how to find the cash, because that was people's number one problem back then. And I was doing the same thing myself. I was getting creative. There's people that I wouldn't tell them verbally. I wouldn't tell them this, but when they said, yeah, I just wish I had the money. And I remember seeing their situation thinking, you've got a heck of a lot more potential money than I've got. I'm $1 million in debt. You're only a couple $100,000 in debt. This is easy, right? But I think that's the thing that was so critical, is I was able to develop that skill and see where there's potential that many people ignore, right? And that's why it's so easy to find money, to find that way to get your money to accelerate and pay you faster than what most people do if they just follow the Dave Ramseys of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, our audience are primarily folks, 50 years of age and older, and some of them are looking at real estate investing specifically here as a means to be able to either, build up a portfolio that they'll be able to hand down as a legacy to their children. Maybe it might even be something they might want to do in their retirement, that so they're just not sitting around, collecting seashells by the seashore, and then there's those that, that have, they've got their nest egg, they just want to be able to get good returns. What advice would you have for those folks? I know it's two different approaches, but what advice would you have based on your experience for those that are, especially those entering into it? We have those that are already retired, but there are those that are approaching retirement. So what would be your advice for them?
I think if you're listening to the show, you're already doing the first step, right? Like, you got to learn and understand it. My biggest thing is I find it hardest with people, especially those that are over the age of 60, right? Like, I've got a 60-year-old client right now. He just He's just retiring from Boeing, from working there for years. Got a great nest egg saved up. For him, the biggest challenge hasn't been investing the money. The biggest challenge is believing he can actually get the returns by investing the money, investing in alternative investments, right? Because he had been so indoctrinated over the decades that the only way to go was, through a 401k or through company stock, right? That was the thing. And, the thing I've had to break through is say, all right, look, here are some options. You could buy real estate. We can go invest in this fund. We can go do this syndicated deal, and I tend to focus him more towards the cash flow stuff. So, the thing that always makes him nervous is, but everybody else is doing this. Well, understand that just because everybody else is doing one thing doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing. A lot of people still, we were taught, I remember growing up as a kid that milk does a body good, pass it on, was all the commercials, right? We now know that milk does not do the body any good. It was a total marketing ploy. And the financial industry is no different. And the biggest thing you got to understand is that everything's been geared towards getting you to give other people money, but not you. It doesn't create cash flow for you. So look at evidence. Just like I said before, the evidence is when you look at people who have been investing in 401ks and IRAs and things over the years, it hasn't worked. But the people you see that actually have hit multimillionaire status or even billionaire status, they either had a business and or two, they did real estate. That's the one sure investment that even after the last recession continues to increase and grow. And when you focus on cash flowing investments, not just how much it grows, right? But actually what it can create as income, real estate is the number one thing to look at. So I guess the biggest thing is get over those hurdles of, this is what everybody else is doing. Should I do it too? And start looking at, hey, everybody else is broke. People aren't retiring well. Baby boomers right now are struggling and they're retiring with very little, hoping and praying that Social Security will not basically not die before they will.
Right. Right.
We don't want to be in that category. And so just know that there's plenty of options. There's plenty of hope. And just like that client from Boeing, he had $1 million. I'm like, hey, even if we only earn a 10% return on that, that's $100,000 a year. Not pulling off 3% like the mutual fund companies will tell you to do, which is only 3% of $1 million. That's $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. You can actually pull off 6 figures a year. So look for those alternative ways. That's been proven. That's been working for millions of us as Americans that are already doing it. Just because the billions of people are investing in one place doesn't mean the millions that are more successful with higher percentage of success rate, you should be following that instead.
That's great. Great advice. Just out of curiosity, what's your opinion of crypto?
Crypto, I think, is a great way. It's the same way I see the stock market, right? If you can gamble money and lose it and be okay with that, perfect. I think crypto is great. I think crypto is here to stay. I will tell you this. But I don't think it's going to look the way it's going to look that people are seeing it currently. I think you're going to see, especially with Janet Yellen, you're going to see the government stepping in, and not just the U.S. government, multiple world governments of the top 20 governments of the world, all creating their own crypto, and they're going to try to ban things like Bitcoin and some of these other independent currencies, or they're going to try to make it to the point where it won't make sense to have those currencies, right? They'll try to negate it as much as they possibly can and control it, because governments want to control currencies, just like they want to control resources. They want to control money supply. Yeah. So I think crypto in and of itself is going to be around for a long time. But if you're trying to buy Bitcoin, and I have some Bitcoin, I'll tell you, I have some of it, but I bought it when it was low, after it crashed, after that it hit that 20,000 a few years back, and then it crashed downward. I bought some around $6,000. I should have bought some around 3,400, but I didn't. But then when it went up, I immediately pulled all of my investment money back out, and I just have the gains growing now. So I'm not putting any money towards crypto right now. I think it has the same fundamental flaws as it had when it was introduced to me when it was a penny, back in 2009. Right. And I could have bought it and been possibly a billionaire by now. But the hindsight 2020, the fundamental problems are still the same with cryptocurrencies, is that it's still a currency that has nothing of true value backing it up. So be careful.
Right. Good comments. Well, you've got this it sounds like a pretty robust business going here. And I mean, you're consulting, you've got a podcast, you've also got an active investment portfolio. What's sort of your long-term goal looking ahead? I mean, are you trying to reach a certain goal, or do you want to see certain things happen with your business? What excites you about the future?
Yeah, I had to make that decision. After 2016, I was able to be independent again, and 2017 rolled around, and I was thinking about what's my next step, right? And we all have to face that, whether it's sooner or later, especially when you get to that point of retirement. For me, I just can't sit on my thumbs, and I feel a personal, almost a duty to teach and to provide hope and solutions for people. That others don't. I could live fat and happy just doing my own investments and just doing my own thing, and honestly, my life would be simpler. But I just feel like we're just like the Spider-Man mantra, right? Where there's much power is given, much is required. There's that with great power comes great responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel that calling. I really do. That's why I have the podcast. That's why I teach on that show. That's why, I still part-time consult, or I still do the infinite banking stuff from time to time, as well. Like, again, I only work about 20, 25 hours a week. That's kind of how I like it. If I work too little, 5 hours, 10 hours a week, my fire fizzles, I lose that passion for life. But if I work 40 hours a week, I burn out. So the fire has to have that balance. And for me, that's about 20 hours a week. So my goal is to keep training and educating and helping people, because the truth is that, if I don't, people will literally lose thousands, if not millions of dollars. And I feel like I have to be out there. And now I'm even training other guys to do like what I do, just so that it doesn't have to be all me. Got it. Great. Well, man, time is zipping by here. We have a little segment that we call Wrap It Up. And I ask you a series of sort of quick questions, and you give me quick replies, sharing resources that have been of value to you. So our listeners might be able to tap in the same resources. So if you are ready, we can go ahead and wrap it up. Fire away. All right. Favorite real estate book? Favorite real estate book? I'm going to go back to the classic. I know you hate to hear it, but Rich Dad Poor Dad is probably my favorite real estate book that opened my eyes to it. That remains mine as well. How about just a favorite general business book? Oh boy, it depends on which aspect of business. I will tell you, at least from a financial perspective, Mike Michalowicz, he actually had him on my show recently. He does the book Profit First. Yes, I love it. Great book to start with. I would add, though, the book that actually made the biggest difference in my life, that helped me become financially independent the second time, at least the perspective shift that was needed to do it faster, was a book that he wrote called The Pumpkin Plan. Oh, yeah, the earlier than, Profit First, right? Yeah. Yeah, he also has Clockwork is one of my favorites, too. Just listen to that one, and because that's the stage of my business, I'm scaling it up, and that's a great book. Yeah, good. How about maybe a website that you use that just is a great reference as an investor that you go to it on a regular basis? It's funny. The website I go to is Yahoo Finance, and I've been doing that for years, ever since I was a stock trader. But I take everything with a grain of salt. I don't take it at face value, but I do see it to kind of hear the sentiment, or to kind of read between the lines of what's really happening behind the scenes sometimes. And that's where I get the most value. I try to stay away from the things that are op-ed pieces, because you never know who's talking, right? But when they're reporting news, it's always fun to kind of dive in and say, this is what Jerome Powell said, but what is he really saying? That's the thing I like to do. So I just go for the simple sites like that. I like it. How about a favorite app, something on your phone that you use on a regular basis for your life or business? Yeah, one that although I probably use the website more than I use the app, but for my finances, I use Mint, mint.com. Just like using QuickBooks for your business, which of course I use as well, but Mint is very similar, but a little bit more visually stimulating and easier to use than QuickBooks. And a great way to track your money, because I think one of the most important things, if you want to get free faster, is you got to know exactly what's coming in, what's going out. And tracking my money and be able to see what's happening, from both a number standpoint and a visual standpoint really helps a lot.
That's great. This one's a little bit challenging, but it sounds like you had a rough go of things at one point here. But if you lost absolutely everything, all your assets, and knowing what you had to start all over again, but all you had was $1,000 in cash, what would you do with that $1,000 to relaunch your investing business?
I would use $1,000 and I would start connecting with people. I would use that to buy lunches, and that's what I did, actually. It happened to me twice. I had a little mini one in 2015 with a divorce, right? And, if you've ever been through a divorce, one, you have to split everything, and that can set you back financially too. But, I was going through hard times. And the thing that I wish I would have done during the last recession that would have got me out faster than seeing in hindsight, if I would have stopped wallowing in my own self-pity and trying to, I was afraid that I would somehow ooze scarcity on other people, that I would be a downer on people. So I didn't want people to share my problems. And the truth is, you really do need to connect. When you're trying to start from scratch, or you're going through a hard time, the best thing to do is connect with other people. You don't have to be a downer, but just kind of let them know where you are and find ways of how you can serve people. That's what I did. Like, I started taking people out to lunch, and I was like, I just want to get to know you. How can I create value for you? What can I do for you? And the more I did that, without expecting anything in return, naturally, even if it wasn't from those people, it was almost like karma in the universe would work in my favor, to where opportunities would come up and I would make way more than that $1,000.
Great. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening here that would like to find out more about you, what you do, maybe even infinity banking. And what's the best way for folks to reach you or find out about your company?
Yeah, best way you can check me out is, of course, you go to moneyripples.com. That's MONEYRIPPLES.com. You can always message me there and contact me there. And definitely, I invite you to listen to my podcast as well. Listen to the Chris Miles Money Show. I got about 500 episodes you can pick from, so take a pick.
Awesome. We're at the same level here. That's great. Well, we have this tradition here. We are called the Old Dogs REI Network, and we have a tradition where our guests close us out with their best old hound dog howl. And you live up in the mountains. You probably hear wolves, coyotes. I'm sure you've got the experience to be able to do this. Just quality here. So if you are ready, we can go ahead and you can close this out with the best howl you can come up with.
My best hound dog howl. Wow. I think of like the dogs in the cartoons and stuff whenever you hear that, right? But here we go.
That was good. That sounded like one of those dogs, and maybe like 101 Dalmatians or something like that.
Oh man, well, that's awesome.
Well, great having you on, Chris. Some good information. I think all of our folks, are concerned about investing, especially with this crazy market and everything else that's going on out there, and the fact that you've provided that great, feedback and your experience, I think, is going to be of value to all of our listeners.
Thank you.
Well, I also want to thank all our Old Dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Please note, everything that Chris presented today will be outlined in detail in our detailed show notes on the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And you're going to look for the episode with Chris Miles. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward, and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.